When my daughter-in-law screamed, "Pay rent or get out, this is my house now," I didn't say a word. Everyone in the room burst out laughing, thinking I was just a broke old man who'd run out of luck. I simply sat there, calm as ever, with a cup of coffee in my hand and a faint smile on my face. I'm Walter Graham, 67 years old, a retired civil engineer who's been called everything from a burden to a freeloader since my wife passed away. 3 years ago, I moved in with my son Ethan and his wife Monica. I thought it would be temporary just until I adjusted to life alone. I built this very house with my own hands 30 years ago, brick by brick, foundation by foundation. But to Monica, I was just another mouth to feed. She didn't know the papers she bragged about owning weren't what she thought they were. She didn't know every insult, every "old man" comment, was being quietly noted. And she certainly didn't know that 5 minutes after her little outburst, I'd take a phone call that would change everything because the house she claimed as hers was no longer hers at all. When my wife, Margaret, passed away 4 years ago, the silence in our old house became unbearable. Every room carried her voice, soft laughter in the kitchen, the faint hum of her favorite radio songs in the garden. I thought moving in with my son Ethan and his wife, Monica, would ease that emptiness. It did, for a while. At first, Monica was polite. She'd brew coffee in the mornings, ask about my sleep, even call me Dad. I appreciated that, even though the warmth in her tone always felt measured. She loved order, control, and appearances. The kind of woman who color-codes her pantry and times her morning jogs down to the minute. My presence didn't fit into her schedule or her carefully curated life. When Ethan and I built this house 30 years ago, I'd imagined generations growing here, kids chasing each other through the yard, family dinners, laughter echoing down the hallways. Back then, I was proud of every nail, every board, every tile. I knew every inch of this place because I made it. But sitting there years later, drinking coffee in the same kitchen, I could feel my authority fading like an old photograph left in the sun. Monica was subtle at first. She'd move my recliner from the living room to a corner by the laundry room. She'd reorganize the kitchen cabinets so my coffee mug was suddenly on the highest shelf. "It's better this way," she'd say with that tight smile. "You'll get used to it." Ethan worked long hours at the bank, and by the time he got home, he was too tired to notice the tension. "She's under a lot of stress, Dad," he'd say. "Don't take it personally." But it's hard not to take it personally when your daughter-in-law starts referring to your bedroom as the guest room, when you've lived there longer than she's been alive. I didn't argue. I've learned in life that silence often speaks louder than shouting. I watched. I listened. And I waited. People think old age makes you slow. It doesn't, it just gives you time to think. While Monica saw me as a relic wasting away on Social Security, I was quietly tending to things she didn't even know existed. The house deed, for instance. Ethan had convinced me years ago to add Monica's name for simplicity, but the structure of ownership was never as straightforward as she assumed. I'd kept majority control under a private trust one she didn't know existed, handled discreetly by my attorney, Carla Reeves. I never told them about Carla, or about the investment properties still under my name in neighboring towns. I had learned long ago that true peace often comes from quiet preparation. The breaking point didn't happen all at once. It came in fragments, whispers, sighs, subtle shifts in tone. I'd catch Monica talking on the phone to her friends. "It's exhausting having an old man under the same roof," she'd complain. "He's sweet, but useless. Doesn't even pay rent." I'd chuckle quietly when I heard that. If she only knew. Once, she hosted a dinner party for her coworkers. She bragged about her beautiful home and how Ethan and I are working so hard to pay off the mortgage. One of her guests, Mrs. Thompson, glanced toward me and asked, "So, Mr. Graham, did you live here long before they bought it?" Monica jumped in before I could answer. "Oh, it's our home now. We've made it completely ours." I just smiled. Of course, I said. Every house changes hands eventually. That night, I stayed up late at my desk, sipping scotch, reading over the trust documents Carla had prepared years ago. Everything was still in place. Every signature, every clause protecting my ownership. Monica believed her control came from the name on the mailbox. Mine came from the signature on the deed. And one signature will always outlast the other. When you've lived long enough, you realize that power isn't loud, it's quiet, measured, and patient. I didn't need to raise my voice to reclaim what was mine. I only needed to wait for the right moment, the right push, the right insult to justify action. That moment was coming. I could feel it in the way Monica's voice sharpened when she talked to me, in the way Ethan avoided my eyes at dinner. The air in the house had changed thicker, heavier, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I knew that one day soon, Monica would go too far. She'd say something that crossed the line from disrespect to cruelty. And when that day came, she wouldn't be shouting at a helpless old man. She'd be shouting at the man who still owned the very floor she was standing on. The shift happened so quietly that if I hadn't been paying attention, I might have missed it. At first, Monica's kindness began to thin like cheap fabric. Her polite, "Good morning, Dad," turned into "morning," then eventually disappeared altogether. She stopped brewing my coffee and started sighing whenever she saw my mug left in the sink, as if that single ceramic cup symbolized everything wrong with her life. It's strange how disrespect rarely arrives like a thunderclap. It seeps in drop by drop, until one day, you wake up drowning in it. Monica had always loved control. Control over her image, her husband, her house, even the thermostat. I noticed she started locking the thermostat box and setting it to 78 degrees, to save electricity, she claimed. Maybe that was true. Or maybe it was just another way to remind me I was a guest in a home I had built myself. Ethan didn't see it. He was too caught up in quarterly reports and deadlines at the bank. When he came home, he wanted peace, not confrontation. "Dad," he'd say, rubbing his eyes, "please, just let it go. She's under a lot of pressure." And I'd nod, because I wasn't about to make him choose between his wife and his father. That kind of choice poisons families. Still, I noticed everything. One afternoon, I overheard Monica on the phone with her friend Lauren. I was in the hallway, about to grab my coat, when I caught her voice drifting from the kitchen. "He's still here," she said, exasperated. "Can you believe it? 3 years. I told Ethan it's like having a permanent tenant who doesn't pay rent. It's not like he even helps. He just reads the newspaper all day." Her words stung, but only for a second. Then they started to amuse me. Because the newspaper I was always reading was the Wall Street Journal, and those pages were the reason I knew when to move my money, when to sell, when to buy. The market was volatile, that season rates were shifting, properties moving faster than most people realized. But I was watching closely. You see, when I built this home decades ago, I also built something else, the habit of planning ahead. Engineers are trained to anticipate collapse before it happens. And I was starting to see the cracks forming not in the foundation of the house, but in the family living inside it. The more Monica spoke, the more reckless she became. She began throwing little barbs at me in front of others. At dinner one night, when I reached for the salt, she said, "Careful, Pop. That's sodium, you don't want your blood pressure shooting up. Hospitals are expensive, you know." Everyone chuckled politely. I smiled. "Don't worry, dear," I said evenly. "I paid off my last hospital bill before you even graduated high school." Her lips tightened. She didn't like when I answered back, even gently. She preferred me docile, invisible. But I'd spent my whole career keeping my cool while board members yelled during budget meetings. I could play this game longer than she could breathe. That night, after everyone went to bed, I made a call to Carla Reeves, my attorney. "Carla," I said softly, "how's the paperwork progressing?" Her voice came through steady and professional. Everything's in motion. Mr. Langford's company is ready to finalize as soon as you sign the release. You're sure about this? Positive, I said. Make sure all documents remain confidential until I say otherwise. You've been patient a long time, Walter. Are you ready for the fallout? I'm ready for peace, I said. Whatever form that takes. When I hung up, I looked around my office, me old drafting desk, the framed photo of Margaret, the blueprints rolled in the corner. Every memory tied to this place. But none of it meant more to me than my dignity. Over the next week, Monica's behavior escalated. She started locking the pantry, complaining that groceries were disappearing too fast. She'd whisper to Ethan, loud enough for me to hear. We can't keep supporting him forever. Maybe it's time to have that talk. Ah, the talk. I'd seen it coming for months. The talk where they'd tell me I was no longer welcome in the home I built, the home I'd quietly sold behind their backs. Meanwhile, life went on. I took long morning walks, greeted the neighbors, fixed small repairs around the house that Monica never noticed. The railing on the back porch, for instance, loose for months, dangerous for anyone leaning too hard. I tightened it quietly. No one thanked me. That was fine. Sometimes, true contribution doesn't need applause. But one afternoon, something changed. Monica hosted a small gathering for her colleagues, showing off the house again. She decorated with fresh flowers and said loudly, "We've poured so much into this place, it's practically brand new." Mrs. Thompson, ever observant, asked, "Isn't this the same house your father-in-law built?" Monica gave a nervous laugh. "Oh, yes. Ages ago. But it's ours now. We've completely modernized it." I was sitting nearby, reading the paper, pretending not to hear. "Our house," I murmured under my breath. That phrase stuck with me the rest of the evening. Our house. The way she said it, so confident, so certain, made me realize she truly believed it. She thought possession was the same as ownership, noise was the same as power. She had no idea that while she boasted about what she owned, the legal ownership was already slipping from her grasp. The sale was nearly complete, only a final signature remained. And soon, when she'd crossed that final line with me, I'd sign it not out of spite, but to reclaim something far more valuable than a property deed. Respect. It was a Friday evening in early May when the tension finally broke. The air inside the house felt heavy, as if the walls themselves knew what was coming. Monica had decided to host a family dinner, her words, not mine, to discuss household responsibilities. I knew what that meant before she even said it. Ethan came home early from work, tie loosened, shoulders slumped. I could tell he didn't want this conversation any more than I did. But Monica was already in hostess mode, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She had the dining table set with candles and polished silverware, an odd touch for what was clearly a financial ambush. "Dinner's ready," she chirped, too brightly. I took my usual seat at the end of the table, across from her. Ethan sat beside her, his posture stiff, eyes darting between us like a man trapped between two storms. For a few moments, we made small talk. Roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, polite silence. But I could feel the shift coming, that moment when niceties give way to truth. Finally, Monica cleared her throat and folded her hands neatly on the table. "Walter," she began, her tone rehearsed, "Ethan and I wanted to talk to you about contributions." "Contributions," I repeated, setting down my fork. "That's an interesting word." "Yes, well," she continued, "you've been with us for 3 years now. We love having you here, of course, but expenses are getting tight, utilities, food, maintenance. You understand?" I nodded slowly. "I do understand. So, what exactly are you proposing?" She smiled, that condescending kind of smile people use when they think they're being gracious. "A fair arrangement. Say, $900 a month. That would cover your share of rent and utilities. Ethan winced. Monica. No, Ethan, she said sharply. It's only fair. Everyone contributes. I looked around the table, at the food I'd bought, the lighting I'd installed, the walls I'd built decades ago with my own hands. $900 a month, I repeated, as if testing the sound of it. Yes, Monica said firmly. If that's not possible, we'll have to consider other options. Other options, I said quietly. Such as? She took a sip of wine, her eyes locked on mine. Assisted living, maybe. There are nice places for seniors now. You'd have your own room, people to help you with. With what? I interrupted, calm but sharp. My ability to walk. To think. To breathe. She faltered. I didn't mean it like that. Ethan tried to step in. Dad, please don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. I turned to him. Your wife just told me to pay rent in the house I built. Should I take that professionally? The room went silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Monica crossed her arms, clearly frustrated that her little performance wasn't going according to script. Walter, she said, lowering her voice, this is our home now. You've had a good life, but things change. We can't keep carrying the extra cost forever. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Your home, I repeated. You're sure about that? Of course I'm sure, she snapped. This house is in our name now. I smiled faintly. You might want to double-check that. Ethan frowned. Dad, what are you talking about? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down. The name Carla Reeves flashed across the screen. Right on time. Excuse me, I said, picking it up. Carla, how are you? Her voice was clear and professional. Doing well, Mr. Graham. I just wanted to confirm that the transaction went through successfully. The buyer signed the final documents, and the funds have been deposited. Congratulations, the property transfer is complete. The entire table froze. Excellent, I said, keeping my tone even. Please thank Mr. Langford for his punctuality. Of course, she said. I'll send over the confirmation email shortly. Perfect. Have a good evening. I hung up and looked up from the phone. Monica's smile had vanished. What was that? That, I said, setting the phone down gently, was the call confirming the sale of this house. She blinked. Sale? Yes, I said calmly. The property has been sold as of 5 minutes ago. You can't do that, she gasped. This is our home. I folded my napkin neatly. Correction, it was your home. As of now, it belongs to Langford Development. Ethan looked pale. Dad, you sold the house. I did, I said. 30 years of ownership, 30 years of maintenance, 30 years of taxes. I'd say it was time to cash in the investment. Monica pushed back from the table, her voice trembling with fury. You have no right. Actually, I said, sliding an envelope across the table, I have every right. You'll find copies of the trust documents in there. You were listed as residents, not owners. You never even bothered to read the fine print. Her face turned white. I stood slowly, placing both hands on the chair I'd built with my own tools so many years ago. You have 30 days to vacate the property. Mr. Langford's team will begin renovations next month. Monica's voice cracked. You're evicting us? No, I said, walking toward the doorway. I'm simply giving you the same choice you gave me. The silence that followed was thicker than the air before a storm. Ethan stared down at his plate, shame flickering across his face. Monica just stood there, speechless, her illusion of power crumbling right before her eyes. Outside, I could hear the faint buzz of summer cicadas and the laughter of neighbors down the street. Normal sounds in an evening that had just become anything but normal. 5 minutes earlier, she thought she owned everything. Now, she realized she had owned nothing at all. Monica stood frozen at the dining table, her knuckles white around the stem of her wine glass. Her face drained of color, the bravado gone, replaced by disbelief. "You sold the house," she stammered, her voice cracking between anger and panic. I nodded calmly. "Yes. It's been finalized. The funds cleared this afternoon." Ethan pushed his chair back, eyes wide. "Dad, what are you talking about? You can't just—" "I can, Ethan," I interrupted softly. "I just did." Monica's voice rose into a near shriek. "You're lying. You can't sell what doesn't belong to you." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "That's where you're mistaken." I slid the envelope across the table toward her. "Inside, you'll find copies of the trust agreement, the property deed, and a notarized sale contract. You and Ethan were never listed as owners. You've been tenants under my trust for the last 3 years." She snatched up the envelope and tore it open, flipping through the documents with trembling fingers. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, scanning the papers silently. "What is this?" he whispered. "The truth," I said simply. "The ownership was never transferred to you two outright. I added Ethan's name as a co-signer for legal ease, but I retained majority control. You might remember that I paid off this house long before either of you moved in." Monica's eyes darted across the pages, desperate to find a loophole. "No. This can't be right. I have the mortgage papers." "The mortgage was dissolved 8 years ago," I said evenly. "And as of this afternoon, Langford Development is the new owner. You can confirm it with the county clerk's office if you'd like." Right on cue, the doorbell rang. Monica flinched. Who is that?" I smiled. "That would be Mr. Langford himself." Ethan blinked. "You mean?" "Yes," I said. "David Langford. The new owner of this property." I walked to the door and opened it. Standing there was David Langford, a tall, well-dressed man in his 50s with silver hair and a firm handshake. He carried a leather briefcase and the calm confidence of a man who had seen every kind of real estate deal imaginable. "Walter," he greeted warmly. "I hope it's not too late. I wanted to drop off the signed hard copies myself. Everything's officially recorded." "Perfect timing, David," I said, stepping aside to let him in. When he walked into the dining room, Monica's expression was priceless, the look of someone watching their entire illusion collapse in real time. "David Langford," he introduced himself politely, extending a hand toward her. "Owner and managing partner of Langford Development." Monica didn't take his hand. She just stared. David turned to me. "The property's in prime condition. My partners were impressed with your maintenance work. We'll begin renovation within 6 weeks." "Glad to hear it," I said, nodding. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "Renovation? You're tearing it down?" David looked at him kindly but matter-of-factly. "We'll be remodeling, yes. The plan is to merge this lot with the adjoining 2 and build new family homes. It's part of the Maplewood redevelopment project. Congratulations, Mr. Graham, you made an excellent sale." Monica finally found her voice, or rather, a choked version of it. "You can't just walk in here and take our home." David's brow furrowed. "Our home? I was told Mr. Walter Graham was the sole owner of the property. I dealt exclusively with his attorney, M.S. Reeves." I cleared my throat gently. "That's correct." Monica spun toward Ethan, desperate. "Say something. Tell him this is your house too." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Monica, I don't even know what to say. I didn't know any of this. She turned back to me, fury and disbelief battling in her voice. You tricked us. No, I said calmly, I protected myself. There's a difference. David set his briefcase on the table and opened it, pulling out a few neatly bound documents. Mr. Graham, here are your final copies. And Mrs. Graham, he added courteously, I'll be sending an official notice to vacate within 30 days, just as required by law. You'll find everything transparent and professional. Monica's voice trembled. 30 days? Yes, David replied. I'm afraid that's standard procedure. The closing date is today, which makes you tenants of the development company until June 15th. You'll have time to relocate. The color drained from her face completely. This is impossible. David smiled sympathetically. Real estate's all about timing. Mr. Graham, you got a great price. It's a seller's market right now. Thank you, David, I said. And thank your team for moving so quickly. You've saved me a lot of trouble. He nodded and turned to leave. Pleasure doing business with you, Walter. When the door closed behind him, the silence that followed was so deep it felt physical. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old wall clock, every sound amplified by shock. Monica finally spoke, her voice breaking. How could you do this to us? How could I? I echoed softly. Monica, for 3 years you've told me this was your home, your space, your rules. I just made that statement true. It's not mine anymore either. She covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. You've ruined us. No, I said, walking toward her, my voice steady. I taught you a lesson you'll never forget. You told me to pay rent or leave. So I left and made sure you'd have to, too. Ethan stood up, guilt written all over his face. Dad, you could have told me. I could have, I said, meeting his eyes. But you already knew enough to see how she treated me and you said nothing. Sometimes, silence has a price. He looked away. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair and slid my phone into my pocket. I'll be staying at the Maple Inn for a few days until I find something more permanent. Carla's arranging a townhouse nearby. Monica was still trembling. You can't just walk away like this. Oh, but I can, I said gently. And I am. I stopped at the door, turned back once, and let my final words hang in the air. 5 minutes ago, you thought you owned this house. Now you understand the difference between holding a key and holding a deed. The look on her face, the dawning realization that her arrogance had cost her everything, was something I didn't need to gloat over. It spoke for itself. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I could hear faint murmurs from the neighbors across the street. The story was already spreading. They'd all seen the fancy dinners, the cars, the parties Monica loved to host. They'd all heard the way she talked down to me. And now, they'd all know what really happened. Some storms end with thunder. Mine ended with a signature and a phone call. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt truly free. By the next morning, word had already spread through the neighborhood. Small towns have a way of carrying news faster than fire, especially the kind of news that cracks through polished reputations. I didn't need to tell anyone what had happened. The story told itself. Monica Graham yelled at her father-in-law to pay rent, they whispered, and 5 minutes later, he sold the house out from under her. By noon, I could see the curtains twitching across the street as neighbors peeked out. I took my morning walk as usual, head high, coffee in hand. Mrs. Thompson waved from her porch with an expression that was half sympathy, half awe. Mr. Graham, she called, I heard about the situation. Is it true? I smiled politely. People love to talk, Margaret. But yes, it's true enough. She shook her head in disbelief. After all these years, you still surprise us. Life's full of surprises, I said, tipping my hat. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Carla Reeves, my attorney. "Walter, you've gone local legend viral," she said, half laughing. "Langford's office told me they've had 4 calls from residents asking if their houses are part of the redevelopment project too." "I suppose that's one way to start a conversation about respect," I replied dryly. "Are you doing all right?" she asked. "Better than fine. I feel lighter," I said, gazing at the home from across the street. "For the first time, I'm not walking on eggshells in my own house." Carla chuckled. "You did what most people only dream of doing, reclaiming dignity without raising your voice. Well done, Walter." Meanwhile, things inside the house were falling apart. Ethan stopped showing up to work for a few days, overwhelmed by the shock. Monica barely left the property. I heard from Mrs. Thompson that she'd been calling realtors, trying desperately to find a way to reverse the sale. But the contract was airtight. The Langford company didn't negotiate once a deal was signed, and certainly not with someone who wasn't a legal owner. The irony was that Monica prided herself on being a marketing expert, always talking about strategy and optics. Yet the woman who built her life around appearances had just lost everything in the most public way possible. By Sunday morning, the whispers had evolved into open stares. At the local grocery store, people who once fawned over Monica now looked away, pretending to browse the cereal aisle. Even her closest friend, Lauren, seemed to keep her distance. The social queen of Maplewood had been dethroned. As for me, I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Justice, when it's pure, doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. That evening, I checked into the Maple in a small, peaceful place on the edge of town. The owner, Mr. Harris, recognized me immediately. "Heard about what happened," he said, sliding my room key across the counter. "That woman of yours sure underestimated the wrong man." I smiled faintly. "She's not my woman, Mr. Harris. Just someone who mistook kindness for weakness." He nodded. "Well, you showed her. Room 203. Best view in the house." From the window, I could see the silhouette of my old neighborhood across the hill. The house lights glowed dimly, but they no longer looked warm, they looked haunted. The weight that had sat on my chest for years had finally lifted. 2 days later, my grandson Ben came to visit. He showed up with a backpack and a determined expression that reminded me of his grandmother. "Grandpa," he said breathlessly, "Mom's freaking out. Everyone's talking about it at school. But I just want to say I'm proud of you." I chuckled softly. "Proud of me? For what? Teaching your mother a lesson?" He shook his head. "For not yelling. For staying calm. You didn't have to shout or fight. You just did it." I smiled. "You know, Ben, when you've lived long enough, you learn that power isn't about volume. It's about timing and knowing when to act." He nodded seriously, like he was trying to memorize the line for the rest of his life. "Can I still come by for our finance lessons?" "Every Tuesday and Thursday," I promised. "That doesn't change." "Cool," he said, grinning. "Can you teach me how you did this?" He gestured vaguely, meaning the entire situation. I laughed. "One day, maybe. But for now, let's start with something simple like compound interest. You'll need patience before strategy." That night, I sat at the inn's small writing desk, scrolling through the messages on my phone. Several of the neighbors had written to me polite notes, most of them versions of the same sentiment: "You did the right thing. She deserved it. We always wondered how you put up with her that long." And then, there were the new messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old colleagues, local investors, even the manager of the hardware store asking if I was available for a small construction consulting job. Apparently, my little incident had reminded everyone that I wasn't just some old man with a newspaper. I was the guy who built half the houses in that neighborhood. Funny how quickly perception changes once the truth comes out. The next morning, while sipping coffee on the inn's balcony, I got a call from David Langford. "Walter," he said cheerfully, "the project's moving ahead on schedule. I wanted to thank you again for the smooth transaction." "I should be thanking you," I replied. "You helped me make a point without ever lifting a hammer." David laughed. "You're a rare breed, my friend, strategic, patient, and terrifyingly composed. If you ever want to consult on future developments, I'd be honored to have you." "I'll think about it," I said with a grin. I might be too busy teaching finance to teenagers. Later that day, while walking through the park, I caught sight of a few neighbors chatting on a bench. As I passed, one of them whispered, "That's him, the man who sold the house." I nodded to them politely and kept walking. I wasn't ashamed of what I'd done. I didn't sell that house out of vengeance. I sold it to remind myself and everyone else that dignity doesn't come from bricks and walls. It comes from standing tall, even when people try to make you small. And in a town that loved gossip and judgment, sometimes the best revenge wasn't loud at all. It was silence followed by paperwork. A week after the sale, the house I'd built 3 decades earlier was no longer mine. But I didn't feel loss, I felt peace. The kind of peace that comes when you finally stop fighting for respect that was never freely given. Monica, however, was not at peace. I learned from Mrs. Thompson that she had gone into full panic mode, calling lawyers, visiting the county office, even trying to reach Langford Development directly. "She's been telling everyone there must be some mistake," Mrs. Thompson said over the phone. "Poor Ethan looks like he hasn't slept in days." I sighed. "He hasn't," I said quietly. "He's finally learning what stress really feels like." The truth was simple. Monica had built her whole life around the illusion of control, the perfect family, the perfect home, the perfect story. Now, all that perfection had been repossessed by reality. 3 days later, I received a call from her. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello, Monica." Her voice was tense but oddly composed. "Walter, we need to talk." "Please." "About?" "The house." I leaned back in my chair. "I thought we already settled that matter." "I made a mistake," she said quickly. "I didn't understand the paperwork, the trust, any of it. But this is our home, Ethan's home. We can fix this. I can pay you back." "Pay me back?" I repeated softly. "For what? Owning what was already mine?" She hesitated. "I mean, I can buy it back. I can get a loan approved. If you talk to Mr. Langford, maybe he'd." "Monica," I interrupted, "the sale's final. And even if it weren't, I wouldn't undo it." "Why not?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You've already made your point. Everyone in town knows you humiliated us." "I didn't humiliate anyone," I said evenly. "I just stopped allowing myself to be humiliated." For a long moment, there was silence on the line. Then her voice softened. "Please, Walter. I'll do anything. I'll apologize." "Apologies are words," I said. "Respect is action. And for 3 years, you showed me what kind of actions you're capable of." She started crying softly. "You don't understand. Ethan's falling apart. We don't know where to go. Everyone's talking about us. Just help us, please." I closed my eyes for a second. I had loved my son his whole life, but I wasn't about to enable weakness disguised as compassion. "I'll help Ethan if he asks for help," I said quietly. "But I won't rescue you from the consequences of your choices." I hung up. That evening, my grandson Ben came by again. He was carrying 2 sodas and a notebook. "I told Mom I was studying at the library," he admitted. "She's been crying a lot." I motioned for him to sit down beside me on the porch of the Maple Inn. The night air smelled like rain. Ben, I said gently, sometimes people cry not because they're sorry, but because they finally realize they're not in control anymore. He looked up at me with wide eyes. Are you mad at her? I thought about it for a moment. No, I said. I'm disappointed. Anger fades. Disappointment stays longer. He nodded, absorbing that. What are you gonna do now, Grandpa? Where will you live? I smiled. Funny you should ask. I pulled a small folder from beside me and opened it, revealing photos of a townhouse near the community college. I bought this yesterday. 2 bedrooms, a little garden, and a study. Close enough that you can visit after school. Ben's eyes lit up. That's awesome. Can I help you move in? You bet, I said. But first, let's finish our lesson for today. We were talking about compound interest. He groaned playfully. Grandpa, you just sold a house and you're still thinking about numbers. Always, I said with a chuckle. Money is like time. If you waste it, it punishes you. If you respect it, it rewards you. He scribbled something down in his notebook, then looked up. Mom says you embarrassed her. I nodded. I imagine she feels that way. She said you planned it. I did, I admitted. But not to embarrass her. To protect myself and to show her that you don't get to treat people like they're disposable. Ben leaned back, thoughtful. So that's the real lesson. Yes, I said. Everything in life is an investment, Ben. Money, trust, respect, they all grow or shrink based on how you treat them. He grinned. You sound like a teacher. I guess I am, I said. Just not the kind that hands out grades. A few days later, I met David Langford at the property to finalize the closing paperwork. He was standing on the front porch, clipboard in hand, when I arrived. Walter, he greeted, we've scheduled demolition for the end of next month. You're sure you're all right with that? I looked at the house, the one that had held my family's laughter, my wife's warmth, my son's childhood. And now, the echoes of Monica's shouting. Yes, I said finally. I built it once. I can let it go now. David smiled. You've got a rare sense of peace about this. When you've seen enough storms, I said, you learn not to chase the thunder. He laughed softly. You know, if you ever wanted to consult with our company, we could use someone with your kind of mind, steady, practical, precise. I'll keep that in mind, I said. He nodded. Enjoy your new home, Walter. You've earned it. As he drove off, I stood alone for a moment, the sun low on the horizon, the house glowing in orange light. I thought of Margaret, of her laughter in the kitchen, her voice calling my name from the garden. For the first time, the memories didn't hurt. I wasn't losing my past. I was reclaiming my future. The demolition day came quicker than anyone expected. Langford Development moved fast. When they said 30 days, they meant it. By mid-June, the property had been cleared of furniture, utilities disconnected, and a chain-link fence now wrapped around the perimeter like a steel crown of finality. I drove by that morning, partly out of curiosity, partly out of closure. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of weather that makes you feel both nostalgic and free at the same time. The once proud house, the one I'd poured 3 decades of my life into, now stood silent, stripped bare of curtains and warmth. In the driveway stood Ethan's old sedan and Monica's shiny SUV, both parked at odd angles, as if even the cars sensed the chaos inside. When I stepped out of my truck, I saw them immediately. Ethan stood on the porch, his hands jammed into his pockets, eyes fixed on the ground. Monica stood beside him, arms crossed, face streaked with tears she was trying too hard to hide. I walked toward them slowly. Neither spoke at first. The only sounds were the faint whir of machinery and the rhythmic beeping of a backhoe backing up into position. Finally, Ethan looked up. "Dad," he said softly, "you came." "I built it," I replied. I should be here when it ends. He nodded, swallowing hard. They said the demolition starts at 10. Right on schedule, I said, glancing at my watch. Monica finally turned toward me, her voice thin and trembling. Please, Walter. You can still stop this. I met her eyes, the same eyes that had once rolled at my every suggestion, that had flashed superiority in every conversation. Now, they were red, desperate, hollow. I don't want to stop it, I said calmly. This isn't punishment, Monica. It's transformation. She shook her head violently. Transformation? You're destroying our home. I took a slow breath. Your home? You mean the one you told me to pay rent in? The one where you said I didn't belong? You built your pride on a house that was never truly yours. I'm not destroying it. I'm freeing it from what it became, a monument to disrespect. Her lips quivered, and she turned away. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. Dad, I don't know what to say. I should have defended you. Yes, I said simply. You should have. He looked up at me, guilt written in every line of his face. I just wanted peace. There's a difference, I said gently, between peace and avoidance. One restores dignity, the other trades it for silence. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning too late. The foreman approached us. Mr. Graham. We're ready to begin. I nodded toward him. Proceed. When the first wall came down, the sound echoed through the neighborhood, a deep, cracking thunder that seemed to shake more than just the ground. Dust filled the air, curling into pale gray clouds that drifted over the lawn. Monica gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. It's really gone. Ethan reached for her hand, but she pulled away, tears streaming down her face. You did this, she shouted at me. You ruined our family. I looked at her quietly. No, Monica. You did. I just refused to keep cleaning up after your mistakes. She glared at me, but there was no venom left, only exhaustion. Years of pretending to have control had drained her. She looked like a general standing in the ashes of a war she started. As the machines tore through the roof, a gust of wind blew debris across the yard. Something small fluttered near my feet, an old photograph, dusty and bent. It was one of Margaret and me, standing on that very porch 30 years ago, smiling at the camera as we hammered the last shingle into place. I bent down, brushed off the dirt, and smiled faintly. Guess that's the last piece, I murmured. Ethan stepped closer. Dad, are you angry? No, I said. Anger burns quick and leaves nothing behind. I've had my fill of that. What I feel now is done. He nodded, eyes glassy. What do I do now? Start again, I said simply. But this time, build something worth keeping, not a house, a family. He looked down, ashamed. Monica's been saying she'll change. She'll try, I said, pocketing the photo. But the first person she needs to convince isn't me. It's you. The foreman signaled the final blow. With one last groan, the structure collapsed into a heap of dust and timber. The house that had once been our family's foundation now lay flattened, reduced to rubble. Monica fell to her knees, sobbing. Ethan crouched beside her, his arm draped around her shoulders. I didn't interfere. Some lessons can't be softened. After a long silence, Monica looked up at me, her voice small. What will happen to us now? I studied her, the woman who'd once told me I was a burden. The one who'd measured worth in monthly contributions and authority in volume. Now, she was just human, flawed, humbled, broken. That depends, I said quietly, on whether you finally understand that respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. She said nothing. I turned toward my truck. The demolition crew was loading debris into dumpsters, the sound of metal against metal ringing like punctuation to the story. Before I climbed in, Ethan called out, "Dad, will we ever see you again?" I looked back at him. "You'll see me every Tuesday and Thursday," I said with a faint smile. "Ben still has lessons. And you could use a few too." He smiled through the sadness. "I'd like that." I nodded, then started the engine. As I drove away, the mirror showed only a rising cloud of dust where the house had once stood. It wasn't destruction I saw, it was clarity. Sometimes you have to watch the past fall apart before you can see what was wrong with its foundation. And sometimes, demolition isn't the end at all. It's the first real act of rebuilding. It's been 3 months since the demolition. The lot where my old house once stood is now just a patch of leveled ground, fenced off with fresh stakes and a bright orange, "Coming soon luxury homes by Langford Development" sign. Sometimes, I drive by on quiet mornings just to see it. Not out of regret, but out of closure, a reminder that even endings can be clean, honest, and necessary. My new townhouse on Elmridge Street suits me just fine. It's smaller, quieter, and somehow feels more mine than that big, echoing house ever did in the last few years. The front yard has a small garden where I've planted Margaret's favorite tulips. They're growing strong, stubborn, bright, full of life. She'd have liked that. I still wake up early, make my coffee, and read the Wall Street Journal like clockwork. Old habits die hard. The difference is that now, when I turn the page, I don't hear Monica sighing in disapproval from across the kitchen or Ethan muttering about keeping the peace. It's just me, the paper, and the sound of the world outside moving on. Ben still comes by twice a week after school. He bursts in with his backpack, drops it on the floor, and sits beside me at the dining table, notebook in hand. He's learning fast stocks, bonds, budgeting, even the psychology of money. Last Thursday, he said something that stopped me cold. "Grandpa, I think money's like respect," he said. "You don't get it by asking, you get it by proving you deserve it." I couldn't have said it better myself. Sometimes I wonder if he truly grasps what he witnessed that day, the shouting, the silence, the collapse. But kids are perceptive. They understand tone better than words. And what Ben saw wasn't just revenge, it was a lesson in self-worth. Ethan visits occasionally. The first time he came by, he looked like a man carrying invisible bricks on his back. He brought takeout, my favorite, pot roast and mashed potatoes, and we sat together in silence for a while before he finally spoke. "Dad," he said quietly, "I moved us into a rental. Smaller place, but it feels peaceful. No tension. No pretending." I nodded. "That's a start." He hesitated. "Monica's trying. She's in therapy. Says she's realizing how much pride controlled her." I'm trying to believe her. "Do you?" I asked. He looked down. "Some days. Not all." "Then take it one day at a time," I said. "Pride doesn't crumble overnight, it erodes, slowly, like stone in the rain. If she's willing to learn humility, that's worth something." He gave a small smile. "I think she's scared to see you again." I raised an eyebrow. "Good. That means she remembers." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You're something else, Dad. I've been called worse." Before he left, he paused at the door. "For what it's worth, thank you. For teaching me what real peace looks like. I thought keeping quiet was peace, but I get it now, it was just fear dressed up as patience." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You're growing, son. That's all I ever wanted." That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset burn through the clouds, my phone buzzed. A text from David Langford. "Breaking ground next week. I'd love for you to stop by and say a few words to the team, a symbolic start, you know." I smiled. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I looked at the fading sky and thought about how strange it felt to see something you built being replaced not with bitterness, but with pride. Because even though the walls were gone, the foundation, my values, my lessons, my legacy remained intact. When people talk about wealth, they usually mean money. But I've come to realize that the truest wealth is dignity. You can lose homes, cars, possessions, even family, but if you still have your dignity, you have everything you need to rebuild. That night, I opened my laptop and began drafting an outline for something new: the Graham Principles, lessons on money, dignity, and respect. I didn't know if it would become a book, a blog, or just a document for Ben to keep someday. But I wanted to leave behind more than numbers. I wanted to leave behind wisdom. My first line read, "Never let anyone convince you that silence equals weakness. True strength lies in choosing when to speak and how." A few days later, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony at the old property. David handed me a golden shovel, symbolic, polished, a little theatrical, but kind. "You built this neighborhood, Walter," he said. "It's only right you help build the next version of it." As the photographers snapped pictures, I saw Monica and Ethan standing across the street. She looked fragile, thinner, quieter. When our eyes met, she gave a small, hesitant nod. Not apology. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. And that was enough. When the first shovel hit the soil, I felt something deep in my chest, not grief, but release. Like the earth itself was exhaling with me. Later that afternoon, I sat on my new porch with Ben. He was sketching numbers into his notebook, muttering to himself. "Grandpa," he said suddenly, "when I'm old, I want to be like you." I laughed. "Careful what you wish for, kid. I've got more wrinkles than a dollar bill." He grinned. "No, I mean calm. You don't shout. You don't panic. You just know things." I looked out toward the horizon, where the light was beginning to fade. "It's not that I know things, Ben. It's that I've learned when not to doubt myself." He nodded slowly, absorbing it. "That's kind of powerful." "Exactly," I said. "Power doesn't mean control. It means peace." He scribbled that down immediately, and I smiled. The world might forget my name someday, but if Ben remembers that line, that'll be enough for me. That night, before going to bed, I stood by the window and looked out at the soft glow of the streetlights. Somewhere across town, the lot that once held my house was now an empty canvas for something new. And maybe that's the point. Every ending carries within it a new beginning, not louder, not grander, just wiser. I whispered softly to the empty room, "We did it, Margaret." Then I turned off the light and let the silence of peace settle in, finally, completely, mine.